He is supposed to have been king of AmaZulu since 1968, but was only installed in 1971, of course.
Yes, he's been there uninstalled, but still maintaining the balance of the history from Senza Ngakona through Shaka and Mpande Qeshwa and the rest of them, I think, with some considerable dignity.
But for the longest time, especially during apartheid years, the king was seen to be close to eNCA leader Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. That, of course, was before tensions surfaced in 1994 or thereabout.
Yeah, but I mean, those kind of alliances were very, very, very simple, because, for instance, you had the ANC, which was an umbrella body. It had rabid nationalists, communists, confucianists. You had the PAC, you had everything. So his alliance with eNCA was also informed, by his sense of Zulu history and Zuluness, until, of course, the politics came and disrupted that unity.
What would you say was or has been sort of his biggest contribution to the Zulu nation, especially in those years, say up to, what, 1994?
I think the ability to keep the nation as big as that one, and as strong as that one, and as self-opinionated as that one, and so feeling destined to what they really want, to hold them actually close together, it's been a very, very, very important thing. Right now, he has been having a meeting with the new president. He is also still talking to Buthelezi, even as we speak. He is with the Federation of African Cultures and Solidarity, and is getting himself a bull, reversing the whole issue of the Battle of Blood River and the Battle of Nongoma. So he is, I think, in his own way, fulfilling that kind of a task of unifying the people.
Do you think South Africans know him as well as perhaps they should?
I don't think they know him as much. Normally you find up in the press that he's demanding money, unlike other people. But again, when you look at the size of the people and the size of the territory, that he does, and in many places, even all over the world, when you speak about him and the Zulu kingdom, or there are other kingdoms, but because of the history of the Zulus, from the Battle of Isanjwada, Shaka, and the rest of it, he is holding that kind of, gravitas.
Well, I mean, he has, of course, previously also courted controversy over his homophobic as well as xenophobic remarks.
Oh, yes. You see, that's really what it is. Again, it's also a question of how politically, educated you are and how easy you are. Some of us had met up with him, and people had met up. When you raise these things actually with him, at least he has got the grace to be able to listen as well as to understand. His beginning point was that, okay, the people coming from a Tebele land, they cannot be called, foreigners, because they went to Mzilikazi, so they're actually back home. That was one of the first steps to understand that most of us who were in exile, we lived in a number of these other countries. We were protected by those people in those countries. When the people actually come in here, it's part of what they themselves had actually fought for. Those are the things that were put onto the agenda for him to digest and to understand. And as far as I know, he had that kind of an understanding that those things are not sustainable.
Well, I mean, most recently, I mean, he has been in the news because, one, he is chairman of the Ingonyama Trust, which is a corporate entity ostensibly set up to administer 32% of KwaZulu-Natal land on behalf of the Zulu nation. And of course, I mean, his biggest fear, it would seem, is that the government is about to expropriate that land without compensation.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the question of grabbing land is a very complex thing. There are lands that were the 13% of 1913 as modified by the Act of 1936 that guarantees that the land that belongs to the Ciskei belongs to Ciskei, Transkei, and what have you. I don't think any government can actually, in a sense, interfere with that.
Which is why, in fact, even the allegation or claim that that's what government wants to do is actually a false one. And government has been at pains to actually explain that.
It is actually a very false one, because what we do, we bundle, issues. Things are not that simple. The 13% land that's covered by the Land Acts, the Native Acts, whatever else it is, cannot be touched.
What do you think then informs his view that government is about to take this land?
Yeah, because there are many, mischief makers who need to get the things. And also was also triggered by some of the things that the Ngonyama Trust in itself has been doing or not actually doing, that creates, some little murky waters. But it's not anything that is insurmountable, that it cannot be, said, because legally, we know when we say the land, grabbing the land, who does that land belong to? There's no land belonging to the natives, the indigenous of this country that can be taken. We are talking about the 87% of the land that was expropriated from the people. That's what we are actually talking about.
It's interesting you're saying that, because earlier you were saying that he's the kind of person who listens, and even when he reckons he will have made a mistake, he is humble enough to accept that he would have made a mistake. And what I'm trying to understand now is why then, in spite of what government has been saying, in spite of what analysts have been saying, he still isn't keen to accept that what he says is what government wants to do is in fact not what government is going to do.
Is it not perhaps that the people that have been chosen by the government to explain, to him, do not understand the cultural nuances and the language that has got to, to be used in order to make people, to understand? We just assume that everybody is actually thinking like us, and yet there are quite a number of nuances. I do believe, honestly, and I hope I'm right, that he will stop thinking that government wants to do that, because I know for a fact that government cannot even dream of doing that, because that would make us a very tin pot government to try to expropriate the land of the people who fought and died and were massacred for that very land.
Well, interesting that because among the consequences of that thinking and the things that have been happening, we are told now that following a meeting that he had with AfriForum, they now have decided that between them they have both Zulus and Afrikaners have a lot in common and are concerned about the expropriation of land without compensation. You don't think that's going to
that's a bit
rub a lot of people up the wrong way?
Yeah, no, that is going to rub the people up the wrong way. One positive thing, at least, would have been that Solidarity, AfriForum, and the Federation of African people to say, okay, here it is, we had problems, we would need to sit around and communicate. It would be a wrong message to say that we are seeing this thing on the same plot. They cannot see it on the same plate. If I was the Afrikaner group that is in there, I will be fighting for my own right and not for my land to be expropriated. It could be very opportunistic.
Perhaps he, more than Afrikaners, actually has a responsibility to put a lot of things in their historical context.
Yeah, no,
because we know about the wars of dispossession and the role of Afrikaners in those wars.
Yeah, whatever it is, whether we ended up in the Battle of Nongoma, Blood River, it was all about the very Afrikaner people who want to appropriate that land. And his ancestors prevented them from doing that. But in my conversation with Professor Danny Hosen, who is a head of PAC, in his thinking, it is far much more kind of nuance. It's not a direct thing of saying we agree, totally there should be no expropriation or what have you. There has to be some appropriation. How it is actually managed is there. The people that are affected in it, be it Ngonyama Trust, be it the Eastern Cape, Limpopo, royalties, have to be put up actually on board, so that maps can be drawn as to where to approach, what not to approach, what to touch and what not to touch.